Before I begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at your life and felt like you're capable of so much more, but somehow you're stuck in the same routines, the same habits, the same version of yourself? You wake up every day, go through the motions, smile when you're supposed to, and carry on, but deep down, you know this isn't your final form. You know there's a stronger, wiser, more powerful version of you waiting to be built. We live in a world that teaches us to hide our struggles, mask our failures, and pretend we have it all figured out. But the truth is, most people are quietly fighting battles no one can see. They're not broken because they're weak, they're broken because they've been carrying too much for too long without rebuilding what matters inside. Here's the reality. If you don't decide to rebuild yourself, life will decide for you. Circumstances will shape you. Pain will define you. Fear will limit you. And comfort will slowly erase your potential. But today you have a choice. You can stay as you are, or you can begin again. Personal responsibility is the foundation of growth because it shifts control from the outside world to your own hands. When you accept responsibility for your life, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as the designer of your outcomes. This mindset change is not small. It fundamentally alters how you think, act, and react. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin to ask, "What can I do about this?" That single shift turns problems into projects and obstacles into opportunities for development. Taking personal responsibility means understanding that your choices, not your conditions, shape your direction. Two people can face the same situation and end up in completely different places because of the decisions they make in response. Life will always have challenges, unfair moments, and unexpected turns. What determines growth is not whether these things happen, but how you respond when they do. When you own your response, you take back your power. You move from being pushed by events to directing your own path, even in difficult terrain. Many people unknowingly delay their growth because they look outward for reasons why things are not working. They blame time, money, education, parents, partners, the economy, or luck. While these factors can influence circumstances, they should never be allowed to own your future. The moment you place blame entirely outside yourself, you give away your ability to change. Responsibility is not about self-condemnation or harsh self-judgment. It is about honest ownership. It says, "This is my life and I have the ability to improve it." When someone practices personal responsibility, they become more disciplined. They stop waiting for the perfect mood, the perfect moment, or the perfect support system. They understand that growth happens in ordinary days through ordinary actions repeated consistently. They learn to keep promises to themselves, not just to others. This builds inner trust, and inner trust builds confidence. Confidence is not some magical personality trait. It grows when you consistently show up for yourself, even when no one is watching. Personal responsibility also strengthens problem-solving abilities. Instead of panicking or feeling helpless, a responsible person looks for options. They analyze situations more clearly because they are not wasting energy complaining or blaming. They become proactive rather than reactive. They prepare instead of procrastinating. They understand that every outcome is feedback and every feedback can be used to adjust their approach. This makes growth more practical because it turns life into a continuous learning process rather than a series of emotional reactions. Another powerful part of personal responsibility is how it shapes character. When you own your actions, you naturally develop integrity. You stop making excuses and start making improvements. You speak honestly about your efforts, your failures, and your intentions. This doesn't make you perfect, but it makes you real. People begin to respect you not because you never fail, but because you never run from your role in the result. This kind of alignment between words and actions is what builds strong personal identity. Personal responsibility also affects relationships. When you stop blaming others for how you feel or where you are, your interactions become healthier. You communicate more clearly, listen more openly, and take accountability when you make mistakes. This reduces conflict and builds trust. You stop expecting other people to fix your emotions, your career, or your happiness. Instead, you take charge of your own internal world, which makes your external relationships more stable and mature. It also creates long-term resilience. Life will test you, sometimes repeatedly. When responsibility becomes a habit, you stop breaking under pressure and start adapting. You learn that you may not control everything that happens, but you always control what you do next. This mindset makes you stronger with every challenge because each difficult experience becomes a training ground instead of a breaking point. True growth begins the moment you stop negotiating with your potential and start taking ownership of your direction. Self-discipline is the bridge between vision and reality, because it is the force that transforms ideas into consistent action. Many people have dreams, goals, and strong intentions, but intention alone does not create results. Discipline is what shows up when motivation is absent, when energy is low, and when comfort seems more attractive than effort. It is the quiet, internal decision to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel. This is what separates people who admire success from people who build it. Vision gives you a destination, but discipline gives you a method. Without discipline, a vision remains a fantasy because there is no structure supporting it. Discipline does not rely on excitement or inspiration. It relies on standards. When you live by standards instead of moods, your progress becomes stable. You stop starting and stopping. You stop falling into cycles of enthusiasm and disappointment. You build a steady rhythm that slowly, predictably moves you forward even on days when the path feels heavy. One of the most powerful aspects of self-discipline is that it trains the mind to endure discomfort. Growth is uncomfortable by nature because it demands change, effort, and sacrifice. The human brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, which is why so many people choose easy habits that give quick satisfaction but create long-term regret. Discipline reverses this pattern. It teaches you to delay gratification, to sacrifice temporary pleasure for permanent progress. When you consistently choose effort over ease, your mind becomes stronger and more stable. Self-discipline also builds identity. Every time you follow through on a difficult task, your brain collects evidence about who you are. You stop seeing yourself as someone who quits, delays, or avoids. You begin to see yourself as someone who can be relied upon. This shift in self-image is critical because behavior often follows identity. When you believe you are disciplined, you naturally act in alignment with that belief. Discipline becomes less about force and more about alignment over time. Another important element is time control. Disciplined people respect time because they understand its value. They don't wait for free time, they create structured time. They set priorities and live by them instead of drifting through distractions. While others are entertained or numbing themselves, disciplined individuals are building skills, improving health, strengthening knowledge, and refining character. This does not mean they never rest, but their rest is intentional instead of accidental. Their work is planned instead of reactive. Self-discipline also acts as a stabilizer during emotional storms. When life becomes chaotic, emotions can take over and lead to destructive decisions. Discipline acts like a guardrail. It keeps behavior aligned with long-term goals even when feelings are intense. You may feel tired, frustrated, or doubtful, but discipline keeps you moving forward in a controlled and intelligent way. This is why disciplined people often appear calm under pressure. They are not emotionless, but they are not controlled by emotion. Another powerful effect of discipline is momentum. At first, it feels difficult and unnatural because you are breaking old patterns. But with repetition, discipline becomes a habit, and habits reduce resistance. What once felt heavy becomes automatic. The brain adapts to structure, and your willpower is no longer constantly drained. Progress begins to accelerate because you no longer need to negotiate with yourself every step of the way. You simply do what needs to be done. Self-discipline also protects your future. Many distractions offer short-term satisfaction while silently stealing long-term potential. Discipline acts as a filter. It forces you to ask, does this move me closer or further from my goals? This awareness helps you avoid decisions that feel good now but cost you later. Over time, these small, disciplined decisions compound into massive life changes. The true power of self-discipline lies in its quiet consistency. It does not seek attention, applause, or recognition. It operates in silence, building structure beneath the surface while the world remains unaware. It is not a dramatic force, but it is an unstoppable one. Daily habits shape long-term success because they are the invisible architecture of your life. What you do once in a while doesn't define you, but what you do consistently does. A single productive day might make you feel accomplished, but only repeated actions turn effort into identity and identity into results. Habits are powerful because they operate quietly, often without conscious thought, guiding your behavior even when you are not actively trying to improve. Over time, they compound in the same way interest compounds in a bank account, creating results that seem sudden, but are actually the product of small actions repeated over long periods. Every habit is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. If you read a few pages every day, you are not just gaining information, you are becoming a reader and a learner. If you exercise regularly, you are not just burning calories, you are building the identity of a disciplined and health-focused person. On the other hand, if you procrastinate daily, avoid challenges, and choose comfort over growth, you are training your mind and body to accept mediocrity as normal. These identities are not built in a day, but they are strengthened every time you repeat the behavior. Daily habits also remove the pressure of making big decisions. When your life is built on habits, you don't have to debate with yourself constantly. You do not wake up every morning trying to convince yourself to work, learn, or grow, because those actions have become automatic. This saves mental energy and reduces resistance. Many people fail not because their goals are too big, but because they rely on willpower instead of systems. Habits are systems, and systems are more powerful than motivation because they function even when motivation is low. The small size of habits often fools people into underestimating their impact. A single workout feels small. A single hour of study feels small. A single healthy meal feels small. But when these actions are repeated daily for months and years, they completely change your body, your mind, and your life. Success is rarely the result of one massive effort. It is usually the result of tiny, intelligent choices repeated so consistently that they become almost effortless. Daily habits also train your discipline in a sustainable way. Grand bursts of motivation often lead to burnout, but habits create a balanced system of growth. You don't need extreme effort every day, you need reliable effort. A person who improves by just 1% daily will eventually outperform someone who works intensely for a short time and then quits. Consistency, not intensity, is the secret foundation of extraordinary results. The environment you live in plays a huge role in shaping habits. Your surroundings either support your growth or sabotage it. If your environment makes it easy to be distracted, you will struggle to build focus. If it makes unhealthy choices easy, you will constantly fight temptation. Successful people often redesign their environment so that good habits are easy to perform and bad habits are hard to perform. They don't rely only on self-control, they rely on smart design. This is why organization, routines, and structure matter more than raw motivation. Habits also shape your self-trust. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, you send a message to your brain that you are reliable. Over time, this builds confidence. Confidence does not just come from talent or results. It comes from knowing that you can depend on yourself. When someone trusts themselves, they aim higher, take smarter risks, and stay committed longer. When someone constantly breaks promises to themselves, doubt becomes their default mindset. Another key power of daily habits is emotional stability. Habits create structure, and structure creates calm. When your day has rhythm and routine, your mind feels more grounded. You are less likely to feel lost, overwhelmed, or directionless. Even on difficult days, your habits act like anchors, keeping you steady while circumstances shift. This stability makes long-term success possible because you are not constantly starting over. In the end, your achievements are rarely determined by your single biggest effort. They are determined by the patterns you repeat when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, and when progress feels slow. Failure is feedback, not a final verdict, because it provides information that success never can. When something goes wrong, it exposes weaknesses in strategy, preparation, timing, and mindset. Many people fear failure because they see it as a judgment of their worth or intelligence, but in reality, it is simply a report card of your approach. It tells you what worked, what didn't, and what needs to change. Without failure, growth would be based on guesswork instead of real-world experience, and improvement would be slow and shallow. When you treat failure as feedback, you stop attaching your identity to temporary outcomes. You begin to separate who you are from what happened. This mental separation is critical because it prevents emotional collapse when things don't go as planned. Instead of thinking, I failed, so I am a failure, you learn to think, this attempt failed, so I need a better method. This subtle shift keeps your confidence intact while still allowing you to be honest about your mistakes. It turns pain into data and disappointment into direction. Failure also forces self-awareness. When things go wrong, there is nowhere to hide. Success can mask flaws, but failure exposes them clearly. It shows you gaps in knowledge, weakness in discipline, poor decision-making, and unexamined assumptions. This is uncomfortable, but it is valuable. The people who improve the most are not the most talented, but the most honest with themselves. They are willing to look at failure without excuses and without denial. And because of that, they gain access to lessons that others avoid. Another powerful aspect of failure is that it builds resilience. Each time you fail and choose to stand up again, you strengthen your mental and emotional endurance. Resilience is not something you are born with, it is something you train through hardship. When you face failure and continue, your tolerance for pressure increases. You become less fragile and more adaptable. Over time, this creates a kind of quiet strength that allows you to handle bigger challenges without breaking down or quitting. Failure also refines your strategy. Rarely does anyone succeed on the first attempt. Progress usually follows a pattern of trial, error, adjustment, and repetition. Each failure trims away what doesn't work and sharpens what does. This is how skills are built. This is how businesses grow. This is how leadership is developed. Without the feedback of failure, you would continue using flawed methods without realizing it. Failure acts like a mirror held up to your process, showing you where refinement is needed. Fear of failure keeps many people stuck in safe zones. They limit their potential not because they lack ability, but because they are afraid of embarrassment, judgment, and discomfort. When you understand that failure is feedback, the fear loses its controlling power. You begin to see risk as a necessary part of learning. You become more willing to try, test, and experiment. This openness accelerates growth because experience is the greatest teacher, and experience requires action, not hesitation. Failure also teaches humility. Success can inflate ego, but failure brings you back to reality. It reminds you that you are a work in progress. This humility is not weakness, it is wisdom. It keeps you open to advice, learning, and improvement. Arrogant people stop growing because they believe they already know enough. Humble people continue to evolve because they understand there is always more to learn, refine, and master. Another hidden gift of failure is that it clarifies desire. When something matters deeply, failure hurts. But that pain becomes fuel. It reveals how badly you want the outcome. Many people quit not because they cannot succeed, but because they never truly committed to the result. Real commitment is revealed when things go wrong. If you continue to pursue your goal despite setbacks, you build a level of determination that comfort could never produce. Failure also creates wisdom through experience. Advice from others is helpful, but personal mistakes leave the deepest imprint. You remember what failure feels like, and that memory makes you smarter moving forward. You become more strategic, more cautious in the right areas, and more confident in your ability to recover. This lived knowledge is more valuable than theoretical knowledge because it is earned, not assumed. The way you interpret failure determines whether it becomes a wall or a doorway. When you see it as a dead end, growth stops. When you see it as a signal, progress begins. Your environment influences your standards and mindset because human behavior is deeply shaped by what surrounds you every day, often more than by what you consciously decide. The people you spend time with, the content you consume, the physical spaces you live and work in, and even the casual conversations you hear all send silent messages about what is normal, what is possible, and what is acceptable. Over time, these signals become your internal standards without you realizing how they were formed. When you stay in an environment where effort is rare and excuses are common, your standards begin to match that level. You slowly lower your expectations of yourself, not because you are weak, but because the environment rewires your idea of normal. If everyone around you complains about work, avoids responsibility, and laughs at discipline, it becomes psychologically difficult to rise above that level. You start to feel like an outsider for wanting more. This is why environment is more powerful than motivation. Motivation is occasional, environment is constant. The same principle works in the positive direction. When you place yourself among people who are striving to improve, who respect time, who push themselves to learn, grow, and challenge old limitations, your standards naturally rise. You begin to feel discomfort not from doing too much, but from doing too little. This is not because they pressure you verbally, but because their behavior silently raises the bar of what feels normal. You stop settling because settling no longer feels comfortable. Environment also shapes mindset through repetition of ideas. The books you read, the videos you watch, the podcasts you listen to, and the social media you scroll through gradually plant beliefs in your mind. If you constantly consume negative content, you start to see the world as unfair, limiting, and hostile. If you consume growth-oriented content, your perspective shifts toward possibilities, solutions, and progress. These beliefs do not change overnight, but they gradually become your default way of thinking. Over time, your mindset becomes a reflection of your information diet. Your physical environment plays a major role as well. A cluttered, chaotic space affects your mental clarity. It makes focus harder and stress easier. A clean, structured, and organized space sends a different signal to your mind. It says that order matters, that preparation matters, and that discipline is a normal part of life. When your space supports your goals, your brain experiences less resistance. You don't have to fight your surroundings to move forward. Your environment becomes an ally instead of an obstacle. Social expectations also form a powerful part of environment. You unconsciously adjust your behavior to fit the group you belong to. This is not weakness, it is psychology. If your peers value growth, honesty, health, and ambition, you are more likely to adopt those traits because the group reinforces them. If your circle normalizes laziness, unhealthy habits, and self-doubt, you will find yourself slowly drifting in that direction, even if you once had higher standards. This is why choosing who you spend time with is not a social preference, but a strategic decision. Your environment also influences how you talk to yourself. The words you hear frequently become the words you use internally. If your environment is full of doubt, criticism, and negativity, your inner voice becomes harsher. You begin to second-guess yourself before even trying. If your environment encourages growth, effort, and possibility, your inner voice becomes more supportive. You begin to challenge yourself with confidence rather than fear. This inner dialogue shapes your actions more than any external reward or punishment. Changing environment is often more effective than forcing willpower. Many people fail because they try to fight their surroundings instead of redesigning them. They try to stay focused in distracting spaces. They try to eat healthy while surrounded by unhealthy options. They try to grow while staying in circles that pull them backward. The smart approach is to shift the environment so that good behavior becomes the default, not the struggle. This doesn't require perfection, but it requires awareness. Environment also affects emotional stability. A negative, stressful environment keeps your nervous system on edge, making you reactive, impatient, and overwhelmed. A supportive, structured environment helps you feel grounded, focused, and capable. This emotional state directly affects the standards you set for yourself. When you feel strong, you expect more from yourself. When you feel drained, you accept less. You are not only shaped by what you think, but by where you stand, who stands beside you, and what surrounds you each day. Consistent effort beats occasional motivation because success is built through steady action rather than emotional bursts of energy. Motivation is unpredictable. It rises and falls based on mood, circumstances, and comfort. One day you may feel inspired and ready to work nonstop, and the next day you may feel tired, doubtful, or distracted. If your progress depends on how motivated you feel, your results will always be unstable. Consistency, on the other hand, does not depend on emotion. It depends on commitment, structure, and discipline, which are far more reliable over time. Occasional motivation creates a dangerous cycle. When motivation is high, people take on too much, work intensely, and set unrealistic expectations. When that emotional high fades, exhaustion and discouragement take over, leading to long breaks and loss of momentum. This cycle repeats over and over, creating the illusion of effort without real progress. Consistent effort avoids this trap by focusing on manageable, repeatable actions. Instead of dramatic bursts, it relies on regular, sustainable movement forward. Consistent effort builds momentum that motivation cannot replicate. When you show up every day, even at a modest level, your brain begins to accept that action is normal. Resistance decreases because the behavior becomes a routine rather than a decision. This is powerful because it removes the daily internal battle. You stop negotiating with yourself about whether to act and start operating on autopilot. Over time, this creates a steady stream of progress that continues even when you don't feel inspired. Another major advantage of consistent effort is skill development. Skills are not built through rare intense sessions, but through repetition. Every time you practice, you refine your technique, improve your understanding, and increase your control. Small improvements stack on top of each other, turning average ability into excellence. Motivation may push you to practice hard once in a while, but only consistency creates mastery. Mastery is the result of showing up again and again, especially on the days when effort feels boring or unrewarding. Consistency also strengthens mental resilience. When you commit to showing up regularly, you train your mind to function despite discomfort. You stop expecting perfect conditions and start working with imperfect ones. This mindset is critical because real life rarely offers ideal circumstances. There will be stress, fatigue, distractions, and doubt. Consistent effort teaches you to move forward anyway. This builds a quiet toughness that becomes part of your character. Motivation often depends on external factors, such as praise, recognition, or emotional excitement. Consistent effort is internal. It is driven by personal standards rather than external rewards. When you rely on consistency, you are not waiting for someone to cheer you on. You are guided by a standard you have set for yourself. This internal standard creates independence. You become less affected by opinions, results, or temporary failures because your focus remains on showing up and doing the work. Another powerful element of consistency is compound growth. Just like small daily investments grow into large sums over time, small daily efforts grow into significant results. One workout may not change your body. One study session may not change your intelligence. 1 hour of focused work may not change your career. But when these actions are repeated hundreds of times, they create transformations that seem extraordinary to outsiders. The secret behind most long-term success stories is boring, repetitive, consistent effort that no one notices at the beginning. Consistent effort also protects you from emotional extremes. Motivation-based action tends to be emotional and impulsive, leading to highs when things go well and lows when things go poorly. Consistency creates emotional stability. You do not overreact to success or failure. You simply continue your routine. This stability helps you stay balanced, focused, and grounded even when progress feels slow or invisible. It also builds trust in yourself. When you show up consistently, you prove to yourself that you are reliable. This creates strong self-belief. You stop doubting your ability to follow through because you have evidence from your own behavior. This self-trust becomes a powerful foundation for tackling bigger challenges and setting higher goals. While motivation can start the journey, it is consistent effort that carries you through it, shaping your character, your skills, and your future through quiet, repeated action. As we come to the end, remember this: rebuilding yourself is not about perfection, and it's not about becoming someone you're not. It's about growth. It's about choosing courage over comfort, discipline over delay, and purpose over fear. It's about understanding that your past does not have the power to define your future unless you allow it. You don't need to rebuild your life in one day. You just need to start. One small decision, one new habit, one brave step forward. The journey won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. Every challenge you face is a lesson, and every setback is a setup for a stronger comeback. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too behind. You are exactly where you need to be to begin again, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Rebuild your thoughts, rebuild your habits, rebuild your standards, and over time, you will rebuild your life. Good luck and thank you message. To everyone listening, I wish you strength, clarity, and courage as you begin your own rebuilding journey. Believe in yourself, trust the process, and never stop growing.